Hi, welcome to Learning English with Pros. This is the channel where we draw on many years of university experience to provide you with reliable information on the English language and handy hints on how to improve your English.
Hi, this is a companion video to the video on nouns because if you know how to translate compound nouns, for instance, into English, it will be fairly easy to also translate compound adjectives into English. So we'll mainly be dealing with compound adjectives today, but also with a few simplex adjectives. Let's start with the theoretical possibilities. I'm going to take you through an overview here of what's theoretically possible when you translate an adjective into English. An adjective is not always or even not usually translated by an adjective. Sometimes, of course, this is the case. This is what I've termed simplex here, although some of the adjectives are actually compounds. Abgrundhässlich, for instance, becomes a simple English adjective or a compound English adjective, loathsome. Abenteuerliche Politik becomes adventurous policy. Augenärztliches Gutachten is ophthalmological report, and beweiserheblicher legal term is evidentiary. Then we often have various types of pre-modification that are necessitated by a translation into English. So abendliche Kleidung is evening clothes. So abendlich becomes the noun evening, and it pre-modifies the other noun clothes here. Altchristliche Riten, number 3, is of course the rites practiced by the early Christians. So it's early Christian rites. We need early Christian here, 2 adjectives pre-modifying rites. Arbeiterfeindlich, here we can use a prefix, anti-working class. Of course, theoretically, as we'll see later, we could also say hostile to the working class or hostile to workers. That's another option. 5, arbeitsrechtliche Vorschriften. Here we need to transpose arbeitsrechtlich to the compound noun labor law, Arbeitsrecht, and this can then be turned into an adjective modifying rules. So we have labor law rules. Benutzerfreundlich, this is a different case where we have a noun modifying an adjective, and this is paralleled in English by user-friendly, and there are lots of other adjectives that work in the same way, environmentally friendly and so on. Okay, or environment friendly, I should say, because both are possible, and we're looking at nouns here, nouns modifying adjectives. Okay, post-modification, die abendliche Stille. Here we need an off phrase, the quiet of the evening. We can't say the evening quiet. Andersgeschlechtliche Person, a person of the opposite sex. Or other prepositional phrases. So amtsärztliche Untersuchung becomes examination by the medical officer. You can't say medical officer examination because that would be ambiguous. Arbeitsrechtliche Klagen, actions in labor law matters. So here arbeitsrechtlich is rendered by labor law matters. Ausländerfreundlich, friendly to foreigners. Similar to the arbeiterfeindlich example, where we said we could also have hostile to the working class. So ausländerfreundlich can also be friendly to foreigners. Betriebswirtschaftliche Forschung, research in business management, in if you want to refer to the discipline itself, on if you want to refer to actual research being conducted on business management, on business administration. So both prepositions are possible here. And then, of course, we have paraphrases, for instance, wirtschaftspolitische Handlungsfähigkeit. We've already learned that Handlungsfähigkeit, a compound noun that ends in Fähigkeit, is usually translated by means of an infinitive. So we have to say ability to do something, in this case Handlung, ability to act. And what kind of ability? Well, the ability to act in economic matters, you might say, in the economic sphere. So that's a possible translation here, or the ability to take economic action. As we've just seen, for adjectives generally, there are usually a number of different potential renditions into English. And this also applies to individual adjectives. We often have one-to-many equivalencies. So you can't rely, again, that's very important, you can't rely on those word-for-word equivalences you learned at school. So charakterlich, for instance, can be translated by of character. Charakterliche Stärke, for instance, becomes strength of character in English. Eine bestimmte persönliche oder charakterliche Eigenart is a particular detail of personality or character. But charakterliche Mängel, again, you have to use the noun here, but in this case, it pre-modifies the other noun, so we have character defects. Charakterliche Qualitäten, on the other hand, is personal qualities, not qualities of character usually. And the phrase charakterliche Anforderungen stellen is make demands on someone's character. Now here's another example of a fairly complex paraphrase taken from Collier Shields' 1977. Diese Stadt, die eine Welt von kleinen Städten verschiedenartigster und vielfältigster Prägung umschließt. A city encompassing a world of completely different smaller cities, each with its unique stamp or with its very own character. So verschiedenartig is translated both by different and the apposition, each with its unique stamp or with its very own character. So we sometimes get these very complex paraphrases, which we always need to remember as a potential option. Now, very often in German we encounter these adjective plus adjective compounds. Frequently they encode combinations of colors. In English we tend to use ish in this case if there's no definite name for a color, and you can also combine two adjectives using ish or y on the end of the first adjective. So grün-blau, the German compound adjective, will be translated as greenish blue or greeny blue. Grau-blau could also be grey-blue, for instance. Grau-schwarz could be greyish-black. Blau-schwarz could be blue-black or bluey-black. If we encode intensity, if we focus on the intensity of the color impression, if you like, then the adjectives, the color adjectives are modified by other adjectives like light, pale, dark, deep, and bright in English. So hellrot is bright red, matt zartblau is pale blue, zartrosa is pale pink or delicate pink, tiefblau is deep blue, and grellrot, that's even more specific, is garish red or gaudy red. Sometimes these are hyphenated, but not very commonly. Now with those color adjectives we've just seen, compound color adjectives, one of the colors is the one that determines the other. That's why they're also called Determinativkompositor in German. So one of the colors is the head, if you like. So if you have orange-rot, then it's a type of red. So red is the head of the this particular compound. There are other adjective plus adjective compounds where the two components have equal status. So, for instance, höflich bestimmter Ton, that's both höflich and bestimmt, or rather, it's polite but firm. So that would be the English translation in this case, a polite but firm tone. Very frequently you get these nationality adjectives in combination, and frequently we use adjectives ending in O, adjectives of Latin or Greek origin, very often that end in O, in these compound relational adjectives. So Deutsch-Englische Beziehung is Anglo-German relations, Franco-German relations, Deutsch-Französische Beziehung, German-American relations, there's no other adjective here, I think, German-Italian relations, but also Italo-German relations, German-Chinese relations, or Sino-German relations. And of course, there are also adjectives of the type klein-dicklich, which is the same as klein und dicklich, so similar to höflich bestimmter Ton, which would give us something like small and plump in English, for instance. Now, another frequent type of compound, of adjectival compound, is a noun plus adjective compound. So adjectives like daumendick, geheimnisvoll, haushoch, hautnah, inhaltsleer, and so on. And frequently we also get combinations with participles, such as kalorienreduziert, which would be calorie reduced in English, or also perhaps low calorie, or emissionsreduziert, schadstoffreduziert, low emission, a low emission car. So frequently the prefix low is used to render reduziert here. With blind, schneeblind and so on, farbenblind, nachtblind, we can use the same suffix in English, snowblind, colorblind, nightblind, but not always. There are always exceptions. Betriebsblind, for instance, which is more figurative in nature, will be blind to the shortcomings of one's own company. These adjectives are often used in comparisons. So daumendick, for instance, of course, means so dick wie ein Daumen, so it would be as thick as or the size of your thumb. Panther elegant would be so elegant wie ein Panther, so it must be as elegant as a panther in English. Himbeerrot, here we have standard renditions such as raspberry colored or raspberry red. Kupferrot, copper red, copper colored. Rostrot, rust colored usually. Ein staubgraues Auto will be a dust grey car. Not a dusty grey car, usually, because that would mean it would be dusty as well as grey in colour. But a dust grey car is just of a grey, of the colour grey, with a particular shade, with a particular nuance of dust. And it wouldn't be dust coloured either, because dust is not necessarily grey, of course. Few more examples of nouns plus participial adjectives. So we have calorie reduced, we've already seen that. Kalorienreduziert or schadstoffreduziert, low emission. But we also get nouns plus participial adjectives of the type Achtung gebietend, which can be taken apart, which can be broken down into its components, and then we get Achtung plus gebieten, of course, and that can be easily translated using, for instance, deserve plus respect. Deserve respect, be deserving of respect, or be worthy of respect. Same thing with ehrfurchtgebietend, where we have awe-inspiring, which is a fixed expression, a lexicalized adjective in English, or command respect. Some of these patterns are very productive, patterns using participles as suffixes, if you like. Laughter, mirth, thought-provoking, fear or sleep-inducing, life-giving, life-enhancing, life-saving, time, money, space-saving, all combinations with self, self-adjusting, self-supporting, self-incriminating, and so on and so forth. German suffixes can often be translated by means of prepositional phrases. So they can be expanded in English by means of prepositional phrases. So for instance, German adjectives ending in feindlich, freundlich, or schädlich can be translated using hostile, friendly, damaging, detrimental, or prejudicial to something. Or sometimes you can also use prefixation, or suffixation for that matter. So Deutsch feindlich could be hostile to Germans, but it could also be anti-German, or it could be Germanophobic. One exception being ecologically harmful, for instance, but of course you could also say harmful to the environment. So sometimes you also get these adverb-adjective combinations. Scheu, the suffix scheu, another example, can be translated using adjectives +2, averse to risk, for instance, risikoscheu, lichtscheu, averse to light, Heiratsscheu, resistant to marriage, but Wasserscheu is scared of water. So here we have another exception. But try to remember these as potential options. Now, things get really tricky when you have to translate these complex academic adjectives and adjectival compounds. Let's look at a few examples from two abstracts on opera, musical theatre. Here we have entstehungsgeschichtlich, Komplexität ihrer entstehungsgeschichtlichen Umstände, ein musiktheatralisches Schlüsselwerk, serielles Kalkül, außermusikalische Sachverhalte, das vermeintlich Abstrakte, so a nominalized adjective, and die präkompositorische Ebene. Let's see how we can handle these adjectives in English. So one way of solving these translation problems is to use your knowledge of English morphology. So German präkompositorisch obviously immediately makes you think of English pre as a suffix, prä and pre, that's the same suffix. So you now need to find out what the translation of compositorisch is. That's compositional, of course. So you get the adjective precompositional, which you can then check against Google Books, for instance, and you'll find hundreds of hits. So it is a correct rendition of German präkompositorisch. Similarly, with außermusikalisch, which is extra musical. So außer is often translated by the prefix extra. And there are lots of prefixes like that which you'll find listed on the web, for instance, on Wikipedia or other sites. Con, dis, in, spelled en, or iron for that matter, and so on. So I'm not going to list them here. Very often you can also form compounds along the same patterns, along the same lines as in German. So literaturhistorisch can be rendered as literary historical. Rezeptionsästhetisch could be rendered perhaps as reception aesthetic, but there are limits to this procedure, and usually you would then opt for a paraphrase and use a prepositional phrase, for instance, and say something like in reception aesthetics. Let's look at entstehungsgeschichtlich. Weniger bekannt ist jedoch, dass Zimmermann sich im Vorfeld mit zwei Opernprojekten beschäftigte, die zwar nie realisiert wurden, in der Komplexität ihrer entstehungsgeschichtlichen Umstände den Soldaten jedoch kaum nachstehen. Now, the first thing you need to do here is, of course, think about Umstände. What's that in English? Well, it's circumstances. Then you need to think of a suitable noun that might be used in your paraphrase. So what's Entstehungsgeschichte? In this case, since it's about the first beginnings, the initial stages of producing an opera, the word Genesis springs to mind. So Genesis can be used to render Entstehungsgeschichte. And then the third step is to find the usual lexicosyntactic environment of circumstances, which in English is circumstances surrounding something. You can find that out by using the sketch engine, for instance. And this then gives you the circumstances surrounding their genesis, which is entstehungsgeschichtliche Umstände. Sometimes you have to use a more complex procedure that's known as chassé-croisé in French or interchange in English. Let's take an example, serielles Kalkül. Bernd Alois Zimmermann's Oper Die Soldaten, ein musiktheatralisches, that will be music theatrical, by the way, or in musical theatre, of course, der zweiten Hälfte des 20. Jahrhunderts vereint komplexe musikalische Strukturen mit unmittelbarer dramatischer Aussagekraft, serielles Kalkül mit expressiver Geste. Now, the first thing you need to do, since Kalkül is a bit of a foreign word in German and you might not be too familiar with it, so look up the definition in the Duden or in other dictionaries, try to find out what it means. What it means is etwas im Voraus abschätzende, einschätzende Berechnung, Überlegung. And it usually, if you look at its context, for instance, on Cyril Belliker's Konkurrenzdatenbank, you'll find it's often imbued with a rather negative semantic prosody, loaded with negative connotations. It often occurs with words like taktisches Kalkül, zynisches Kalkül, perfides Kalkül. So there's a little bit of negativity involved here. Which can also be found in English calculation. So with cold calculation, that's like committing a murder with cold calculation or in cold blood and so on. But here, of course, it mainly refers to the mathematical process of composing and doing that in a very methodical manner. So there's only a very faint tinge of negativity here. We now have to ask ourselves, well, what does serielle refer to in the first place? And it refers to serielle Musik, which in English is serialism. Of course, we also have the adjective serial in English, but the noun is used more frequently. And interestingly, of course, the adjective calculated is used like the noun Kalkül in German. So we can operate an interchange here, as we would say in translatology, in translation theory, and turn the noun Kalkül into the adjective calculated, and the adjective serielle into the noun serialism. By the way, serialism is a way of composing music that uses a series of notes in a particular order, and it uses this to build up a whole piece of music. And these series and patterns can be applied to all sorts of music, all sorts of aspects of music. So how loud it is, how soft it is, and so on. So we would translate this as calculated serialism, so carefully and deliberately planned serialism. This is what the German expression means, and we need chassé-croisé here. Finally, a few words on the adjectival noun, so nominalizing an adjective. This can be easily done in German, but also in English with abstract nouns, and these often occur in academic texts again. We've already seen das vermeintlich Abstrakte, but let's start with das Abstrakte itself, which could simply be rendered as the abstract into English, or das Erhabene becomes the sublime. If you want a whole list of adjectives that are commonly nominalized in this way, you can look at the Collins Coburn Grammar Patterns website, which is the same website as the Collins Dictionary site. You just have to choose the option grammar patterns, and you'll find adjectives like absurd, the aesthetic, the avant-garde, the banal, the baroque, the best, and so on. Now we have to translate, erhält das vermeintlich Abstrakte einen Verweischarakter auf die szenische Umsetzung. Now here, of course, we have to unfreeze, to unpack the phrase again, das vermeintlich Abstrakte, by using what's called a pseudo-cleft clause in grammars, a what clause. So we would say what is purportedly or what is supposedly abstract, or even using the old-fashioned that which is ostensibly or supposedly abstract, becomes capable of referring to the stage performance itself. So if the adjective is further modified by an adverb, for instance, as in this case, das vermeintlich Abstrakte, usually a pseudo-cleft clause is the solution. Das Ungewöhnliche an etwas, if the nominalized adjective is followed by an plus a prepositional phrase, or plus a nominal phrase in German, then the usual translation is about in English. The unusual thing about this performance, or you could also use a pseudo-cleft clause again, what is unusual about this performance. Thanks for watching. See you next time.